All right, here we begin chapter 4, and this chapter is really an overview of what we will be studying the remainder of the course, with an introduction to the different systems and how cells form tissues that then form organs that keep us humans alive. You will find your list of chapter objectives on a separate page in Canvas. All right, so points to ponder as we think about what we're going to talk about, slightly different than what is listed for your chapter objectives. What is a tissue? All right, what does that mean? It's not something used to blow your nose. In this case, what is an organ? What is an organ system? There are 4 main types of tissues that we'll look at. All 4 of these are going to be at a variety of composition in terms of what organ we're looking at, what system we're looking at. All right, really, what do these tissues look like? How do they function? Where are they found within the body? And then a major point within this course is going to be what is homeostasis and how is it maintained? All right, so what is a tissue? It's a collection of cells of the same type that perform a common function. So there are 4 major tissue types in the body, and those are going to be connective tissue, muscular tissue, nervous system or nervous tissue, and then epithelial tissue, which sometimes we simply refer to it as nervous cells, nerves, neurons, epithelial cells, but as a group, they can be called a tissue. So the first type of tissue is going to be connective tissue. And the connective tissue is what it says. It connects materials. So it's going to bind and support parts of the body. It has specialized cells. It has what's considered a ground substance. And that's really going to be what's going to act as its ability to connect material. And then it's going to be composed of different protein fibers. All right, so that ground substance is non-cellular, and it ranges from solid to fluid in terms of its overall composition. The ground substance and protein fibers work together to make up the matrix of the tissue. All right, so that's really just going to be kind of the meshwork that is present to allow for connecting of tissue. And then there are 3 main types of connective tissue. All right, there is fibrous material, there's supportive connective tissue, and then there's fluid. All right, what you have here is figure 4.4. All right, and this shows you the different types of connective tissues. All right, both the supportive and fluid connective tissues shown here, supportive and fluid, give you some examples of what you have or what is composed of those connective tissues. So supportive is going to be cartilage. Right? Cartilage is solid yet flexible. So you find cartilage in your nose, you find it in your ears, among other places. But there's also then bone. Bone is solid and it's rigid. All right, fluid connective tissue is blood, contained in blood vessels, lymph, contained in lymphatic vessels, which is a watery-like material. I find the fluid connective tissue to be intriguing simply in the idea of it. All right, you probably wouldn't think of blood and lymph as a connective tissue because it's liquid. It's not solid. It's not necessarily sticky like it would be glue or anything. But really it's a means of connecting systems together by transporting fluid, transporting nutrients, transporting waste, really creating a connection, kind of like a dot-to-dot puzzle, where there is a connectivity because of that fluid. All right, the fibrous connective tissue, you've got loose and you have dense. Loose tissue would be found throughout the body, right? Kind of a little bit or similar to that matrix, to that meshwork. And then also as far as fat or adipose tissue, that is also a fibrous connective tissue. And then dense fibrous connective tissue would be tendons and ligaments that allow bones to connect to bones, muscles to connect to bones. All right, then muscle tissue allows for movement in the body. All right, it's a soft tissue. You all are probably aware of what muscle tissue is, all right? We're all aware of muscle. All right, it gives rise to the muscle's ability to contract. Muscle tissue varies with function and location in the body, and sometimes its function is based on its location. There are three main types of skeletal tissue or muscle tissue. They're skeletal or striated, and that's what how it's gonna look when you look at the actual muscle tissue. There's smooth or non-striated muscle, and then there's cardiac muscle, which is sometimes known as semi-striated. Smooth and cardiac muscle contract involuntary without conscious intervention. All right, so your heart is going to beat regardless of whether or not you will it to beat with your mind. Your intestinal tract is composed of smooth muscle. So your intestinal tract is going to move food and move waste through your intestines without you telling it to. All right, skeletal muscle is going to need or is going to move by voluntary movement. So you are going to have to use your brain to send signals to your hand, to your fingers to actually move. Nervous tissue, or nerve tissue, is the main tissue component of the two parts of the nervous system. Right, the brain and the spinal cord are the central nervous system, and then there's the branching peripheral nerves of the peripheral nervous system. Right, those, both of which are going to regulate and control body functions and activity. The nervous system is going to be composed of neurons, or nerve cells, which receive or transmit impulses, and neuroglia, also known as glia cells, that assist in the propagation of the nerve impulses, as well as provide nutrients to the neurons. Nervous tissue is made up of different types of nerve cells, but they all have an axon, the long stem-like part of a cell that sends action potential to the next cell, and they're all going to be made of a cell body. And there's going to be bundles of axons that actually make up the nerve itself. So epithelial tissue. All right, epithelial tissue is a group of cells that are going to form a tight continuous network. They're going to line the cavities and surfaces of blood vessels and organs throughout the entire body. Functions of epithelial cells include, but aren't limited to, secretion, selection, absorption, protection, transcellular transport, right, being able to move material in and out, as well as sensing material or changes within the environment. Epithelial cells contain no blood vessels, which is interesting. So they must receive nourishment via diffusion of substances from the underlying connective tissue. All right, how do we talk about epithelial cells? How do we name them? How do we classify them? All right, you have the number of cells in terms of simple cells, which is one layer, and that you see an example of that on the left, the simple epithelial cells. You have pseudostratified, which appears to have multiple layers, but really only have one layer, and then stratified, which means the cells are flat, pretty much flat, but there's going to be multiple layers on top of each other. Then you can also classify them by the shape, whether they're cuboidal, cube-shaped, columnar, column-shaped, or squamous, which is flattened. And you're going to have a combination of these two. You can have simple cuboidal or simple columnar, which means you would have one row of cuboidal. One row of cuboidal cells. All right, here you have the pseudostratified, which again you have one layer, all right, but it kind of appears to have two layers because this guy is kind of sitting on top of this guy. But when you look at it in terms of the basement membrane, where these actually come into contact with that flat surface underneath the cells, it's still just one layer. And here you definitely have columnar shaped cells. They're shaped like a column. These guys are cubed like, right? They're kind of a expanded cube. You might think of a cube more as a square. And these are slightly columnar. All right, but you can see the difference between the two, hopefully. All right, so you don't have to memorize all of this, all right, but you might see a question on your homework assignment in Connect about this. I don't remember. But I want you to be aware of it because you'll hear these different terms on the news, like someone has squamous cancer, something like that. And so you know what kind of cancer it is or what kind of cells are there. And usually when you're talking about skin cancer, it's going to be squamous because your skin has a lot of flattened cells there. All right, so now we're going to move from tissue to organs and organ systems. An organ is two or more tissue types working toward a particular function. And then an organ system is a combination of organs that work together as well to carry out a particular function. All right, now, let's see, figure 413. This is a important figure to look at. And you have part 1 here, and then part 2 here. The combination of the figure looks at the major organ systems. The integumentary system, that's going to be your skin. Cardiovascular system, lymphatic and immune system, digestive, respiratory, urinary, skeletal, muscular, nervous, endocrine, and reproductive. What's nice about this figure is it gives you a very broad overview of what the system does. The endocrine system provides hormones, coordinates organ systems, regulates metabolism and stress responses, involve fluid and pH metabolism, and then the organs, testes, ovaries, adrenal glands, pancreas, thymus, thyroid, pineal gland. All right, so this is going to be, this one figure is going to cross two of your chapter objectives. What are the organ systems? What's the purpose of them? Right? Real quick purpose there. And some of these you probably already know. That reading over it a few times, it's going to be solidified for any test question that you might have over it. All right, this might be a different idea that you haven't thought much about, but within the body there are cavities. All right? And the different cavities are going to be covered by membranes. So you have here the cranial cavity contains the brain. You have the dorsal cavity. You have the thoracic cavity. The thoracic cavity contains the heart, lungs, esophagus. You have the abdominal cavity, stomach, liver, spleen, pancreas, gallbladder, intestines. You have the pelvic cavity, right, reproductive and other organs. Right? This is the ventral cavity, dorsal cavity, front, back. And then you have the different types of membranes. Right? Synovial membranes line the cavities of freely moving joints. Meninges cover the brain and the spinal cord. Serous membrane, mucous membranes, all right, line different areas, membrane or mucous membranes, and it's time to stop.